Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Glenorchy Planning Authority on Monday the 11th of July 2022. I'm Beck Thomas, Mayor of Glenorchy and Chairperson of this afternoon's Planning Authority meeting. Joining me in chambers this afternoon is Alderman Angela Ryan, Alderman Jan Dunsby and Deputy Mayor Stephen King, my fellow Planning Authority members, and we have apologies this afternoon from Alderman Kelly Sims. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet today on the land of the Palawa people and acknowledge Tasmania's Aboriginal people as the traditional owners and continuing custodians of Lutruwita, Tasmania, this land on which we meet, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I advise that the Glenorchy Planning Authority intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. The Planning Authority has full power to make planning decisions on behalf of the Council. Before we begin, I'll explain our meeting procedures. So the planning officer will present their assessment and recommendation and then answer any questions of Aldermen. The chairperson, myself, I'll invite the applicant and any interested parties to have their say by addressing the meeting, and speakers will have 5 minutes each which to address the meeting. The chairperson, myself, may then ask the planning officer to comment on any matters raised. Us, as a planning authority, will then discuss the application. For statutory planning applications, the planning authority will decide the application and our senior statutory planner will explain appeal rights. And for planning scheme amendments, the strategic planner will explain the decisions being made by the planning authority and the Tasmanian Planning Commission. When deciding an application, the Planning Authority is required by law to seek to further the sustainable development objectives of the Act, consider representations received during public notification period, and make the decision by reference to the current planning scheme provisions. Our meeting rules are pretty simple. We simply ask that all those present at the meeting, whether that be online or in person, please comply with any directions given by myself as the chairperson, and of course respect people's views and their right to have their say. We have 2 items on our agenda this afternoon, and but before we get into that, item 3 is pecuniary interest. Do any planning authority members have any interest on any matters on the agenda? None. No. And item 4 is confirmation of minutes. That I have a motion that the minutes of the Glenorchy Planning Authority meeting held on 14th of June 2022 be confirmed. Do I have someone to move this? Alderman Ryan, someone to second? Deputy Mayor? Any discussion of minutes, Alderman Ryan?
No, thank you.
Any discussion of the minutes? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 5. The first major item on our agenda this afternoon is proposed use and development, demolition and staged redevelopment of showgrounds, community meeting and entertainment, general retail and hire, sports and recreation, visitor accommodation, food services and hotel industry at 2 Howard Road, Glenorchy. And our Coordinator of Planning Services, Trevor Bowen, will present this application to us. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As indicated, this is an application for the staged demolition and redevelopment of the Hobart Showgrounds located at 2 Howard Road, Glenorchy. Before I begin this, I'd just like to acknowledge that while I'm identified as the author of this report, Vanessa Tomlin did the bulk of the assessment and the work on this report, and I just tidied up some things at the end and pulled it together and presented here tonight. So I just would like that to be acknowledged because there was a lot of work put into this by Vanessa. As I was saying, staged demolition and redevelopment, and it has a number of use classes involved in this: community meeting and entertainment, general retail and hire, sports and recreation, visitor accommodation, food services, and hotel industry. Now the subject site is around 13 hectares in area, and it has frontages to the Brooker Highway, Howard Road, Knoll Street and Elwick Road. Elwick Road is really through the Elwick Road Service Road, I believe it's called.
Can I just pause you there, Trevor? Sorry. IT support, are we able to get the presentation up on the side screens, please?
Just working on it now.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you. The site is the historic showground site that has been used for the Hobart Show for many years. And more recently, some land was removed from that site for the construction of the Bunnings and Spotlight development. So the area, the subject site is the area shown in red on the aerial photo, which we now see on the screen. The zoning of the land, the zoning of 2 Howard Road, it's in the community purpose zone. The land is also subject to the Hobart Showground specific area plan, which adds an additional layer of planning regulation and controls over this site. To the east, I guess you'd say, across Howard Road, there's land that's included in the general industry zone. To the west, in the southern part, is an area of light industrial zoning, and also to the west, which is in the brown colour you can see on the map, that's the inner residential zone. Have a number of photos just to run through sites that are particularly relevant to our discussion today. First is a photo of the Knoll Street entrance to 2 Howard Road. The second one is the Elwick Road entrance, which is off the road service road. And the third one is the main entrance, which is off the Howard Road, which is the Howard Road entrance to the site. There is a fourth entrance, which I don't have a photo of, which is through the Spotlight development, but that is for commercial vehicles only to go to the loading dock and the like. The development proposed in this application will involve the demolition of nearly all of the existings on the site, and that's a bit of a collection of photos of buildings that will, as part of this redevelopment, be demolished. So it's I guess you'd say, a comprehensive redevelopment of the showground site. Now, the proposal, and I guess a few things to mention at the start of that. This application does not include, nor does it need to include, the annual Hobart Show. The annual Hobart Show has existing use rights and is also identified as a no permit required development in the specific area plan. So the Hobart Show continues unaffected by the approval of this application, if that's what happens here tonight. It doesn't need another approval, it has existing use rights. The other thing to mention is there has been a fair bit of coverage in the media over the past couple of years about a large-scale residential redevelopment of this site. And I just wanted to mention that this application we're dealing with here tonight, this afternoon, does not include that residential development. That would be subject to a future application that would be made after some amendments are made to the specific area plan, I believe, to allow that to happen. Now, if you look on the screen, we have an overall site plan for you to see there. The main things I'll draw your attention to there are the purple coloured area on there is the new pavilion building, which encompasses 3 wings around a central lawn. That is the major structure and the major construction that will be occurring in terms of buildings as part of this redevelopment. If you look towards the Brooker Highway frontage, which is towards the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the motorhome park, where it's been relocated from its existing location, which is not far from Knoll Street, to much closer to the Brooker Highway. What you can also see through there, and it's outlined sort of in blue, is the internal access road, which runs through from the Howard Road entrance and exits through the Elwick Road service road. That will be a 2-way road, an internal road, a private road that won't be under the control of council. There's a secondary access off that with a connection through to Knoll Street, although that, I should mention, is very much a secondary access into this site, and there will be restrictions on the use of that access because of its nature. Commercial vehicle access, as I've already mentioned, also occurs through the Spotlight development, and you'll see some areas of parking immediately below where the pavilion building is there, and that is to provide access for service vehicles and commercial vehicles only. There are a total of 266 on-site parking spaces proposed. The bulk of those are proposed to be along the internal roadway as both perpendicular parks and parallel parks. Moving a little bit closer, that's a little bit of a better view of the proposed building, the central lawn that sits within the wings of the building, and the arena, which would be redeveloped to actually bring it back to a full oval as part of this development here. What you can also see on that plan there is on the part of the pavilion building that directly faces the oval is an area of tiered retractable seating. So the current building on site include a grandstand, and this proposal here retains the ability to sit in tiered seating and view events on the arena, but makes multiple use of that space. With that seating is retracted, it can also be used as a pavilion space. Moving in a little closer, this is the ground floor plan of the proposed pavilion building. There's a lot of detail on that one there, but I can tell you that what in the sort of lilac colour are the pavilion and exhibition spaces, of which there are about 5,000 square metres proposed. There is the RAST administration space, about 350 square metres. If we go to the next level, the more purple colour we see, let me just explain some of the purple colour over to the left-hand side of the screen for the RAST societies spaces, and there's about 700 square metres. The purple colour sort of more towards the right-hand side of the screen is the RAST administration, about 350 square metres. The light brown colour in the bottom left-hand side of the screen is the location of food tenancies, about 850 square metres. And the blue area towards the top of the screen, which is actually on this level, the first level, and also on the lower level, is a function centre lounge with a kitchen, and that totals around 1,200 square metres. We also have, as part of this, and I won't point out the location of them all, as a small-scale hostel, particularly for use during show events and where people can stay for a short period of time. There's a central kitchen that obviously provides for catering where there are functions being held within the exhibition and function spaces. Obviously, amenities for the public. There's also a broadcast tower, and if I go to the next screen, we can see in that towards the right-hand side where that white area is within the building, that's the void at the first floor level, which allows the retractable seating at the ground floor to be tiered up, giving a view of the arena. So that is the proposal that we're considering here this evening. Very quickly, the elevations, we're looking there at the east and the south elevations. The most prominent feature you can see there is the tower, and that tower is, I believe, 36 metres in height.
And that's what
36 metres is the height of the tower. The bulk of the building is actually much lower than that. You'd be testing me to recall what the height of that is. And this is also looking at the western and the northern elevations. And again, you can see where the tower is, which is adjacent to where the arena is located. Okay, that's the building, and that's probably most of the running through the proposal. A major aspect of the assessment of this application was around the events that will occur in this pavilion building, predominantly within the building and within the courtyard lawn area that's contained by the wings of the building. Noise and amenity impacts, I think, was the most significant issue we assessed with this application here, and certainly took up the most time to actually work through the issues around those matters, particularly given the location of residences within the inner residential zone, within 50 metres of the site. What we're looking for in terms of events here as part of this application is live music to occur within the pavilion building, but with the doors that provide viewing opportunities for the tiered seating to be closed. So what has been modelled here is actually the impact on amenity of live music within the pavilion with doors closed. In terms of outdoor events, live music within the courtyard area only has been part of the assessment of this application, and the material provided with the application did not propose live music on the arena, which would also be outdoors. Moving on to the discretions, there were a number of discretions that needed to be considered as part of the assessment of this application. They arose from the zoning, from a number of codes, and also from the Hobart Showground specific area plan. Now, I'll run through very quickly what those discretions were and how they were assessed. The first discretion is in 27.3.1, which is within the community purposes zone, and it requires the planning authority to consider the noise and lighting impacts of development for a non-residential use within 50 metres of land in a residential zone. As I said, noise and impact on amenity was a primary matter that was addressed in the assessment of this application, and we are happy that it has been resolved and that what is proposed can satisfy the performance criteria. This has been achieved by requiring noise management measures to be undertaken, including ongoing monitoring and the ability for a feedback loop. So if we find that there are unreasonable impacts on the amenity of those properties, there's an ability to go back and have a look at the noise management measures and refine them. There are also some limits on the hours of operation, which have been included in the conditions, and limits on the number of events per year, and particularly the major events. This was an approach that was actually suggested by the applicant's noise consultant and form part of the application material. Major events are events with more than 1,000 people attending. Minor are less than 1,000, and there's a limit of 12 major events per in each 12-month period. There are requirements in the conditions for the preparation of a noise impact assessment and a noise management plan to be informed by that impact assessment. There's also requirements for noise verification reports to be prepared and for that to feed into the noise impact assessment and noise management plan. The reason for that is that noise is capable of being modelled, but to actually test it on the ground is the real test. So the verification report is part of the process of ensuring we don't have adverse amenity impacts. Lighting is also a consideration under 27.3.1, and conditions have been included in the recommendation to ensure that lighting does not adversely impact those houses most closest to the development site. The second discretion is under the Parking and Sustainable Transport Code, and it relates to the number of car parking spaces. 266 on-site spaces are proposed to be provided. A traffic impacts assessment was provided with the application and was reviewed by Council's traffic engineer. It's considered that the number of spaces proposed actually satisfies the acceptable solution when you assess it just based on the floor area of the proposed uses. However, it's understood that when particular events may occur on site, access to all of those on-site car parking spaces may not be available during those events. And therefore, measures need to be implemented during events to ensure that there are not adverse impacts of parking in adjacent streets and the like. The third discretion is under the Road and Railway Assets Code, and that relates to the impact of traffic generation on Knoll Street, which currently has a lesser level of traffic, a far lesser level of traffic than Elwick Road and Howard Road. Again, a traffic impact assessment has been provided and reviewed by Council's traffic engineer, and it's considered that there is not a significant impact on the Knoll Street Elwick Road intersection, particularly in terms of the volume of traffic and the visibility at that intersection in terms of safety. The report does include recommended conditions limiting the movement of commercial vehicles through Knoll Street. We're not wanting to see heavy vehicles or vehicles over a certain size utilise Knoll Street to access the site. The fourth matter relates to the potentially contaminated land code, and it relates to the fact that there would be some level of excavation works on the site to realise this development. It's previously been identified that there's a low level of contamination. An environmental site assessment was submitted as part of the application and has considered the performance criteria are satisfied provided an appropriate soil and water management plan is provided during the development of the site. Turning to the Hobart Showground Specific Area Plan, there are 4 discretions under the Specific Area Plan. The first one relates to the food services and hotel industry uses, which are both discretionary uses. It's considered the performance criteria has been satisfied, although what is proposed is not strictly in accordance with the Specific Area Plan. The buildings proposed do have a high standard of design. There will not be adverse amenity impacts from the uses that are proposed, and that's in terms of traffic, noise and other amenity impacts. And the proposed traffic management and parking provision is considered to be acceptable. So that performance criteria is considered to be satisfied. Building height, there was a discretion for building height. The pavilion building is 12.4 metres in height and the broadcast tower is 36 metres in height. It's considered the performance criteria is satisfied because the building is centrally located. It is not located near any boundaries of the site. And the broadcast tower, more particularly, is quite separated from the boundaries of the site, particularly the residential areas. So it's considered there'll be no adverse impacts from allowing a broadcast tower of 36 metres on the site. In relation to building facade design, the Hobart Showgrounds Master Plan sets out building envelopes that are required to be adhered to. The design that we're dealing with here today is not in accordance with that, it's a variance with that. However, it is considered to be a high standard of design, an appropriate design, and an appropriate configuration of buildings and open spaces on the site. It's also considered that suitable materials are proposed to be used, and there's been an avoidance of long blank walls within the site and alcoves and the like, which could contribute to unsafe spaces. The final discretion related to the internal access. Again, this came back to the fact that the Specific Area Plan includes a Hobart Showground Urban Design Plan, and the layout of the internal access was not in accordance with that plan. However, it is considered to satisfy the performance criteria. Some of the measures that led us to that conclusion are the fact that permanent local area traffic management is proposed, which will ensure that it's a low-speed vehicle environment and therefore that it's safe for pedestrian movements and for vehicle movements. So that is the discretions that we were required to consider when assessing this application. The final matter I have is the advertising and representations. The application was advertised from the 18th of June to the 1st of July, and no representations were received during the advertising period. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Do planning authority members have any questions for Trevor at this stage?
I've got a couple of questions.
Sure, Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. You talked about the existing show has its own standalone rights, and would that include the potential for music acts on the arena under that hat rather than this particular one?
Through the chair, I believe it would, yes.
So potentially, if there's a music act attached to the show, that could happen.
That could happen, yes.
Thank you.
That's
My
fine.
second question relates to disability access parking. So the report details that there will be some parking. Will they be spread across all of the site or just maintained in the what's identified as the VIP area? So will they be around the site to make greater access for people, depending where the activities may be?
I'm getting some nods from. Look, I believe that would be the case. I don't think the disability, through the chair, I don't believe the disability parking has been provided for VIPs only. It has been provided for all.
No, I just thought whether it was just in that place, in one place, whereas, as it say, it's a very big site for some people to walk from that area to where the activities might be they wish to access.
Yeah, certainly that's a matter that will also be addressed through when we start to approve some of the engineering drawings for the site,
Yes.
when the Australian standards and the disability requirements need to be addressed. And it would be we would be making sure that where they're being provided is where they best serve the people who could actually would actually be using those spaces.
It's always important to make sure the access can be as free as possible. I also note around the parking for floats is fairly limited. There's only about a dozen or so areas for float parking. Now imagine if there was a horse event, gymkhana or something like that, there'd probably be more floats or more participants than that. So that is just some float parking, there'd be alternative arrangements made for float parking elsewhere on the site or off site for people to take it perhaps after they've dropped their horse off. That doesn't appear to match what might be required for an event involving competitors with horses.
Through the chair, I imagine what would be happening there is that the parking is provided in particularly for people to unload and to load, and they may need to make alternative arrangements, I expect, if there was a large number of people attending. It really comes back to the management of the site and how the role. How the management determines to, on the day-to-day management. So
I understand that, we are limited in our capacity, but I thought it was a question worth asking because trying to move vehicles with floats, maybe as an arrangement with off-site or with the racing club over the road or something like that has happened in the past. I think that's the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further questions for Trevor? Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask if we have a timetable for the proposed renovations, demolitions and renovations?
Through the chair, well, we don't normally get that as part of the assessment. The permit's valid for 2 years and extensions can be given. That's probably really a question that's best answered by the applicant.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because the show has their rights over the space as well.
Yes.
How much is it going to interfere with
Yes.
the next possible show, which is
So
October, is it? November, October? Yeah.
through the chair, again, that doesn't really come up as something that we need to consider in the assessment here. And it's something really best managed by RAST in how they're actually sequencing the development on the site. I believe the best answer I could give there is that the redevelopment is proposed to occur in stages, and you normally would be doing stages to allow some things to continue at the time. So, my best answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
So subsequent to Alderman Ryan's question there, so at the moment, the way that this is worded and the regulations that we're working under, so this would have a 2-year span
Yes.
for this to happen. So each of those stages, even though it says they're staged, would need to have been commenced within that 2 years, or
Through the chair, when we give an approval and there are stages, the commencement of the first stage is usually adequate to actually establish the rights to continue with the balance of that. So
Thank you. That's
Once they've
clarified.
made a substantial commencement on the earlier parts of this, the rights to continue with the rest of it over whatever period was appropriate for the development could continue under this permit.
So as it's put to us now, that's fine once the works have commenced, and then the organisation will be responsible for those timelines, not council.
Through the chair, that's correct. Council's not responsible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Woman Dunsby. Anything from you, Deputy Mayor?
No, not at the moment. I think they've covered everything that we're concerned about at the moment.
I had a question about hours of operation, just to clarify, Trevor. I think from looking at the conditions, it's 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. I know in the report there was one reference to 1 a.m., but I think that might be a 1 p.m. Sorry.
Yes.
But I think that might be a mean 11 p.m.
Yeah, through the chair, I believe that's a typo.
Yeah.
It's
So
meant to be 11
11
p.m.
is the latest
Yes.
use. Yep. And one of the use classes in the application is hotel industry, which permits gambling. So I'm just, obviously we've had a lot of discussion in our community over recent years and particularly recent weeks about electronic gaming machines. So is there, just confirming, there is capacity for us as a planning authority to condition use of electronic gaming machines in a planning application?
Through the chair, there is ability to do that. I've had a look at the application here, and there was no specific reference in the application to proposing electronic gaming machines as part of the proposal here.
No.
The hotel industry use that's proposed is for the show bar and a function area similar to what's on the site now. But there's no, not that I'm aware, there's no prohibition on council, including a condition to restrict that.
Sure, thank you. Well, perhaps we might open up the opportunity to hear from the applicant, and then we can throw to any further questions planning authority members might have before we go to a decision on the matter. So we have joining us Brett Tarossi, Chair of Royal Agricultural Society Tasmania, CEO Scott Gadd of RAST, and Poppy Sharkey from the applicant Irene Inc. Planning. So Mr. Gadd, or who would like to address the authority first?
Do you want me?
Yeah, please come forward to the table just for the benefit of the speaker up here.
Okay, thank you. Can I just start by thanking your officers who have worked with us studiously now over many, many, many months to get us to this point. A power of work has gone in on your side to make sure we get this right, and we really appreciate the ability to interact with them over the last probably over a year now. To make sure we get it right, and that has also meant once we got the DA in, we got a pretty good response and a really good time frame. So again, thank you to your staff for that. Just quickly, this whole development is really about the future of the site, the future of the show, and the future of the society. The site is beyond its useful life. Every building needs major work. The in-ground infrastructure is all gone. It's falling apart. Water, electricity, sewer, it's all past its use by date. It made sense to us to start again. There's a lot of buildings there that have a lot of emotional attachment to our people, but at the end of the day, you just can't possibly justify it economically to keep band-aiding it. And also it doesn't meet the ongoing and more stringent requirements of a modern event precinct where you're going to have a lot of people together. The considerations we have now are many and varied. In the past, all you had to worry about was if a fire broke out. Now you have to worry about fire, you have to worry about terrorism, you have to worry about a whole range of different scenarios, and there's just no way we can make that site cut it. So that's why we're here. We're also trying to build a facility for the northern suburbs and for the greater Hobart area that is a family-friendly site. There are not many facilities in Greater Hobart that are really geared towards families and family entertainment and providing a space for community groups to come together and do what they do. That's who we are, that's what we do. We want to make sure this works. In order for that to work, we have to balance some commercial uses so that we can effectively subsidise the non-commercial uses. As a not-for-profit, we're happy to do that. We've always done that. We will continue to do that. This facility gives us the opportunity to make some commercial income and provide space available for the dog club, the cat club, the Ford car club, the Medi, the range of use my site now, and we'll continue to use it. And we will have a pricing structure that is basically one tier for not-for-profits or community groups, a full commercial tier, and then a hybrid tier in the middle for those that cut over both. So we fully intend to continue to provide cost-effective space to community groups. This will be modern space, it'll meet all the requirements, it'll be up to spec, so it'll be an ideal location to do a range of things. We also need flexibility because events are continually changing and moving around, and the way you stage them and the way you produce them and where you put them is constantly evolving, as we've seen with the various festivals we see around town. We want a family-friendly space. You've got some great venues in Hobart. There's nothing that goes over 1,000 seats. This will have a 1,500 seat auditorium. We know that there are many, many acts that would come to Hobart if they had a 1,500 seat venue that don't come here now. So we've deliberately pitched it there. So we're not cutting across anyone else's business. We're trying to create new business and we're trying to bring new stuff here, particularly to the northern suburbs, because arguably we've got a great facility in Mona, but it's an adults playground. There's no doubt about that. Okay, and we've got the deck, which is a great facility as well, but the economics of that is up around the 5,000 to 7,000 mark. It's the big stuff. We're trying to position in the middle of those two and give this community something that will really work and program in a whole heap of stuff. So that brings me to the comments about the arena. We really do need the flexibility to have music events on the arena. That'll be a big part of it. It's a big issue out here. A lot of our younger people out here need things to do and they don't engage with the traditional festivals like Mona Foma and Dark Mofo and Festival of Oysters, and on they go. We need to be able to put something in the backyard out here for these kids and give them a different path in life. You guys know that better than I do. So we do need to be able to have music events on the arena. I'm not sure why it was missed, but it's a critical component of this. All of the restrictions and conditions around noise will make sure that's managed properly. There's no doubt about that. We will be able to do it. But we need the flexibility. So for example, last year's show I brought in PJ Masks. Any of you with kids or grandkids would know that that's a cartoon show that the ABC run. They're the sorts of acts I'm talking about. The Wiggles is obviously big enough to go to the deck, but there's a whole, there's Bluey, there's PJ Masks, there's a whole range of them that we can program into this site, school holidays, whenever. That's why I need the ability. If you're going to put 2,000 or 3,000 people in there, it's going to be an arena-based thing, and that's what's going to work best, particularly for little kids. We know that from our show experience. So that's one critical point. There's a few other things around staging. Couple of typos which I imagine has been tidied up this morning in the back and forth that we had. There's another sort of an issue around this use of major and minor events and the terminology. It's not consistent really with how you manage or other references to noise. So I actually think some of those things could be tidied up a little bit better. And we'd be happy to do that through a mediation role post this meeting if that's the best way to do that. Safe to say we've had no representations. We've done a lot of work in community consultation. I've personally spoken to a lot of people, including our Knoll Street residents, many times. And I think that's why you didn't get any representations. Everybody's comfortable with where we're trying to head with this, and they know that we're there to look after our community, and that includes the people that are over the back fence as well as the broader community. And I think we've got the runs on the board there. I know I've only got 5 minutes, so just quickly, some of the questions that just came up. During an event, we may restrict some on-site parking in order to manage pedestrians and vehicles in separate spaces. I have a 70-something year lease on the car park next to the fire station on Goodwood Road. We will maintain that. That will be maintained as our overflow car park. That will be our main area. When we shut down spaces on the site, we'll direct people over there, and that should give us sufficient capacity. Disability parking, we put the disability parking right in the courtyard, so it's central to most things. But if I'm to run other events, as we always do, we'll make sure there's disability parking at the points in the ground where they're needed, subject to what's going on, and it does chop and change a bit, but we will always make sure there's plenty. But there are at least 7 in the main courtyard, which is front and centre of everything. So, from a day-to-day use, that they'll be the main spots. Float parking for horses. So those car parks that you see at the back of the loading dock, they're for the big ones. They're for the predominantly large floats or trucks, often they are now. General standard horse floats during a horse event, we can position around the arena, and that's where they like to be. So they can come and go, they can set up a base and work from that base. So it's only really the big ones that we might have issue getting in and out of the tighter spaces that we've made provision for at the back of the loading dock. We would only normally do one horse event a year at the show. We're hoping that might improve, but best case scenario will be 3 events a year. So we can manage that. There was also a question around timing and what does it mean? So availability of contractors, provided this all goes smoothly tonight, we won't be able to get machines on site until mid next year. So we really can't start our preparatory work until probably first up next year. We believe we can get it within a 2-year construction timetable. So that would mean that the 2022, 2023 and 2024 shows will potentially be disrupted. And by that I mean they'll be going to other venues. The core of the show will go to the regatta ground for the next 3 years, and our animal competitions will spread out around the state for the next 3 years, driven by where there's suitable venues, basically. So sheep will go to Campbelltown Showground, poultry will either go to Brighton or Longford Showground where there are purpose-built facilities, that sort of thing. We are confident we can be back a good few months before the 2025 October show, do a few events to bed it down, and then open that show in our new facility with what will be a more contemporary and modern show offering. The only other point that I wanted to comment on was gaming. We have absolutely no intention, desire or will to put pokies into this facility in any way, shape or form. That is not what we're about. We're about a family-based entertainment precinct, and we don't see pokies as compatible with that. So we have no issue with any condition that might address that point.
I think it's going to also be an exceptional universal access site. It will be level. It will be quite easy to navigate because we currently have a lot of people with different kind of mobility issues coming to the show. And one of the things that we've worked really hard at is making sure that everybody can enjoy every square inch of this place. So we're proud of that outcome in the design.
Thank you, Mr. Gadd, and I do apologise if I referred to you as the chair incorrectly. I think you are the founder of New Ground Network, and you're in that capacity, so I do apologise for that.
Scott didn't really want me as his chair, I think.
That's not me, it's the current president.
So I do apologise. Thank you. Do Planning Authority members have any questions for our representatives here?
Nothing further from me.
Just to react, Scott, where you said you have no intention of gambling. If there was a change of management or management in general, is there anything in writing that would suggest that for the future? I mean, I accept fully what you said now, but
No, Stephen, the short answer is no, and we could do that. The reality is, though, a future board can set whatever policy parameters they like. So even if we went to the length of stipulating that, a future board can always change that. So yeah, I can't guarantee that. All I can say is the current board, the current direction, this whole thing, we're not interested. We think we've got the business model right. We don't need.
I think you do too, yeah.
We don't need pokies. We can do a lot of different things here, and we can generate money in a lot of different ways to support the non-income generating activity. But no, we haven't locked anything in that locks anyone in for the future, because even if I put it in the Constitution, they can change it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had a couple of questions. You talked about, so there's 16 noise conditions, and you talked about those, and you've talked about particularly what you're referring to is the sticking point, I think, is around the outdoor live music events within the on-site arena area. So condition 10 as it stands says outdoor live music events must only occur within the pavilion courtyard only, no live music events are to occur within the on-site arena area. So what I'm hearing from what you've said is that is an issue for the organisation, and perhaps that whilst there may have been a bit of detail sort of lacking or misinterpreted in the noise reports around intention to use that on-site arena area for live music events. Perhaps if that could be subject to further planning applications, would that?
Well,
We just don't want, we have a problem with the way the wording is currently, in that it appears that it's prohibiting any future application for that. That's what we would like.
I think it's a little bit inconsistent. I mean, one of the conditions is to put a bund or a concrete wall between the arena and the motorhome park, and that's driven by noise. So that's clearly driven by noise generated on the arena. So there's a little bit of inconsistency, but we can't, as 10 is written, we cannot live with that. It reduces our flexibility and completely undermines our business case. We can manage the noise in terms of hours of operation. We'll have all the equipment to monitor it. We'll have to do noise management plans, which can factor all that in. And if there's issues, there are mechanisms in the planning recommendations to come back to us. We'll have to keep records, and then we can work through that noise management plan. So I think it's adequately covered. Our intention is not to drive our neighbours out with noise. It's the opposite. It's to actually draw them into the site to get engaged in what's going on. So we will not step beyond the other parameters. By doing that, we'll make sure anything we do on the arena is within those parameters. I mean, I'm not going to put an AC/DC concert on the arena. That would be more suited to the deck. But I might bring Bluey over, for example, which essentially will be a song and dance show with kids, with Bluey characters in costume. So it will be an amplified outdoor music event. We won't fit that in the courtyard. We'll have to use the arena. The seating, the 1,500 seats is designed to focus on the arena or be reconfigured to focus internally, so we've got maximum flexibility. But we do need to be able to use the arena, put a stage in front of those seats and have it outdoors. So I see that as critical to the business case, but we're not going to overstep the mark. There are plenty of conditions about how we can manage that and how we can monitor it to make sure. The other thing is, whilst it's not part of this DA, we will be coming back with a SAP amendment, as you know, for the housing, and the housing will be constructed around the edges between Knoll Street, between our current residential boundary and the arena. They'll have to have design parameters built into them to make sure the noise is not an impact in those dwellings, but they'll also give us a massive buffer in relation to any noise that drifts over the boundary. In fact, it'll be virtually impossible to do that.
So on that point, can I ask our planners for some advice then on that particular condition and the concern that it prohibits live music events in our on-site arena, even subject to any further planning application, or would it do that, or would a further planning application potentially supersede that?
Through the chair, the condition that's being proposed there applies only to this permit. So a future application could be lodged solely for the use of the arena for music events, and that would be assessed on its merits at that time. So I guess the short answer is it prohibits it occurring under this permit, but it doesn't prohibit it occurring under any future permit if an application was lodged and approved by the planning authority.
And so the issue, if I understand correctly from our previous discussion, the issue with approving it within the current application is that it wasn't clearly advertised with that provision. So potentially neighbouring properties or members of the community who may have wanted to make a representation it wouldn't have been clear to them that that was the proposed use?
Through the chair, that is certainly one of the issues. My understanding is that the noise reports that were submitted, and there was a lot of working back and forwards through the issue around noise, that one of the events that wasn't modelled was an outdoor music event on the arena. Now, compared to those that were modelled, a live music event on the arena would have, in my opinion, a far greater impact on those residences than the ones that were modelled. So it's not just a case that it wasn't included, it's that it's most likely to have the greatest impact. And so therefore, in a sense from the community's perspective, if they read through the reports that came in as part of the application, if they read the report that was on the agenda, they would see that that was not part of the proposal. From the planning officers and our environmental health officers' perspective, that's not something that we considered in the assessment of noise impacts when we assess this application.
Right.
Tara.
So if we were to, hypothetically speaking, if we were to reword the condition to say outdoor live music events must only occur within the pavilion courtyard only, live music events within the on-site arena are not to occur unless approved through a subsequent planning application,
Yes.
it's effectively the same
It
thing,
doesn't-
but it's making it clear to the applicant that they can, in fact,
Yes,
apply again. And would you be satisfied with that?
yes.
Through the chair, if I could suggest, unless approved through a future planning permit.
Yeah. Throughout future planning. Just consulting with our Irene Inc. representative here. Poppy, did Poppy have some suggested alternative wording, or
No, that's perfect.
that sounds okay?
Perfect.
So it would read, outdoor live music events must only occur within the pavilion courtyard only. Live music events within the on-site arena area are not to occur unless approved through a future planning permit.
It's clause 10.
Yes, that's condition 10. So you did mention you had a few other concerns and that you'd be willing to mediate them, but I am conscious that appeals and mediations take time and money. So I guess my question is whether there's scope, depending on the complexity of them. I think there's probably not scope to deal with them here, but Trevor, I guess my question to you is how, if we approve them as they are in the current format, my understanding is the only way they can be changed is through an appeal process. So
Through the chair, I've had a quick review of the suggested changes that came through. I think there's another avenue, which is an amendment of the planning permit after it has been issued through a Section 56 process. I think a lot of it appears to be minor wording change. And we have picked up the issue of the staging through the amended condition which was circulated to the Alderman. We've addressed this condition 10, which I think was the real contentious issue from the applicant's perspective. I would expect that the majority of what else is there could be dealt with for a future Section 56 amendment application. And I would think the fact that we have not received any representations does in some way broaden the scope of what we can consider through a Section 56 amendment.
okay.
When you say future, so how future is future?
Through the chair, as soon as this permit becomes valid, which is as soon as the 14-day appeal period has run its course, there would be an ability for an application to be made to amend the permit.
Right.
Thanks for clarifying.
Have to come into effect first.
Okay, 14 days. Yep.
14 days.
What did you think about that prospect?
Gives us 14 days to work through that. If not,
Yeah,
we've still
I
got the
think
option.
Trevor's right, they're minor in nature, and I think we can knock them over. He's already seen them, so based on that, I'd say we can sort that out in the next 14 days, and if there's any future sticking points, then an amendment is probably more appropriate.
Okay. Excellent. Is there any particular you needed, like that was really the key one, wasn't it, 10?
Yeah, it was, and the staging was the other one, and that's,
Staging.
it's
Staging's
really
been
just about how the construction will roll and
Yes.
where we're going to need to spend money on various reports at certain times. It's better for us to do that as we need it rather than have to wear that cost all up front.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so that's
Yes.
principally it.
Yeah. And planning authority members have received a copy of the amended wording of condition 3. which I believe you've seen as well. Have you seen that as well? Yep. So that will form part of the recommendation.
We haven't.
If we consider any further questions from planning authority members.
No, you just asked the questions that I was going to ask, so that's great.
Good. Well, I would like to vacate the chair and hand over to the Deputy Mayor to chair our decision on this matter, as I would like to move an amendment to the recommendation.
So you have an alternative?
I have an alternative motion,
Right.
if you would
Okay,
so assume the chair, please.
thank you. We can do that. So the Mayor, Alderman Thomas, has an alternative motion that you'd like to put forward at this point before we go any further. So would you like to present that?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the recommendation that a permit be granted for the proposed use and development of 2 Howard Road, Glenorchy, subject to 43 conditions. So adding a condition 43 to read, the use of electronic gaming machines as a form of gambling must not occur. To amend condition 10 to read, again, outdoor live music events must only occur within the pavilion courtyard only. Live music events within the on-site arena area are not to occur unless approved through a future planning permit. And to accept the amendment to condition 3 as has been provided to all of us planning authority members.
Okay,
So that being the alternative recommendation with all of the other recommendations as they stand currently.
so amendment to all, condition 3, amendment to condition 10 and condition 43 being an additional clause stating,
An additional condition?
the condition, sorry, stating no gaming machines. Based on the discussion we had before, we'll go, do we have a seconder for that? Have a second for that? Mayor Thomas. you've got
Thank
the floor.
you. Thank you, Chair. So I think we've had quite a bit of discussion around explaining the reasons for the alternative motion that I'm proposing here this afternoon. I'd like to echo the thanks to council officers for what has been quite a significant application to work through, and thank RAST for bringing this application to us. It is a significant development and an important development in our municipality, and it is important that we get it right. It's going to have long-reaching economic and social benefits, far-reaching and long-standing social and economic benefits in our municipality, and it's an important development for our community. So I appreciate the effort that's gone in to the application, both from RAST and from our council officers, to make sure that we are supporting a development that has all the elements that will benefit our community for a long time into the future, and appreciate our ongoing relationship with RAST through the development process. So as I've mentioned, we've had a lot of conversation over a long period of time now about the harm caused by electronic gaming machines in our community, and we have a statement of commitment on gambling as a council, and whilst that's something that's separate to our role as a planning authority, broadly we do have a role in protecting our community from the harms that electronic gaming machines provide, and where we have capacity as a planning authority to contribute to that aim, then we should take the steps that we can to prevent that harm. So I think appreciate the conversation that we've had here, and the intent of RAST is not to have electronic gaming machines, but to safeguard the future for future generations when we're gone, no longer here. Having this as a condition will certainly protect our community from that harm. So that's the rationale for including that. Happy too that we could have the conversation around clause 10, because it is important that the development is one that enables RAST to be a sustainable organisation. 200 years is a long time to have been in business, and hopefully the development will assist you to be around for another 200 years and beyond, and continue to bring much joy to our community of Glenorchy and Greater Hobart and Tasmania, in fact. So I'm very happy to support the recommendation and look forward to continuing to work with RAST through this process.
Thank you. Any other comments from our fellow planning members? Alderman Dunstan.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to note this is such a significant and important and exciting development on the site. It's going to be a new era for the whole of our community. The multiple elements that are there are going to appeal to a whole range of people. They'll both be from Glenorchy and from the wider areas of Tasmanian community as well, and there'll be other infrastructures there in the future to support them to come to attend have accommodation and things like that as well. I've noted the collaborative approach between Glenorchy City Council and RST over the time that this application has been in consideration before it's come here, and I'd like to thank both parties around that we've got to this point and that we've negotiated the points here, and even today we've seen a bit of toing and froing to be able to accommodate this particular situation. So I commend all the parties involved in that. I look forward to it going forward, and look forward to it coming to the vote.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly echo what my fellow panel members have said. I think this is a really exciting adventure. As someone who has grown up with the Royal Show and gone there since I was a little girl, it's easy, as you said, to be sentimentally attached to these old buildings. But as you said, they have reached, well and truly reached their use-by date. So it's fantastic to think about a new era and something exciting for new generations. So thanks for making the application. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment as well. As the oldest member of the panel, their buildings down there were old when I was young, so they must be even older now. It's wonderful to see progress. Change is inevitable and it's a good thing. I appreciate the Mayor's additional condition. I know we had the discussion before around that. How can we do this? And I think this is a condition will keep the community happy as well, and it fits in with your family style business operation that you're planning, and we really appreciate that. The progress, just excited by the progress already taking place down there, and look forward to future progress. And back to you, the mover.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate also, I should note that Russ has engaged with our community on this development. I think it's really important and something that we always encourage organisations to do and invest in when undertaking significant developments, and I know that you understand the importance of that. So just on behalf of the community, thank you for engaging with our community on the proposed development and continuing to, because it is going to be a long process. There's not much else I can add, I don't think. I'm happy to support the recommendation, as I said, and look forward to seeing progress. Thank you to my fellow planning authority members for supporting the amendment, because it is one that is important for our community.
Thank you. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Obviously, our planners will. Is there anything you wanted to say to that? Any conditions you want to, any discussion you want to have around that? Or?
Through the chair, no, apart from the usual words we have, which is that the application has now been approved by the Glenorchy Planning Authority. A planning permit will be prepared and will be issued to Irene, who was the applicant, and the applicant will have 14 days in which to lodge an appeal if they're not happy with the approval or the conditions that are attached to it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And now I have to decide if I hand it back over to the Mayor or not. This is a bit of a power play. I'll just think about it for 5 seconds. I'll hand it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Moving on to our final item in our meeting this afternoon. Item 6, combined planning scheme amendment and planning permit application request for 32 Cheviot Road, West Moona, PLS 43A 2102. And our Senior Strategic Planner, Lyndall Byrne, will present this one to us.
Cheviot or Cheviot?
Cheviot.
Sorry.
Are you from Glenorchy?
From Claremont. we had another
Cheviot.
language out there at Claremont. Cheviot.
Thank you, Lyndall.
Thank you, Chair. So,
French.
Order, please.
Sorry.
so this is a rezoning request to prepare a combined planning scheme amendment and subdivision application. So the rezoning request element deals with portion of 32 Cheviot Road in West Moona, which is currently within a community purpose zone. So you can see the extent of the land on the slide there, and the portion of the land which is proposed to be included in a general residential zone is also shown. So the portion of the land to be rezoned has been determined to be surplus to the use of the school. The topography of the land has been assessed as being more challenging for the school to actually develop for educational purposes. And it's also considered that the topography may also inhibit a use of the land for community purposes as well. So hence the school feels it's surplus to their use. The land has an area of priority vegetation over it, which basically is that portion of the land which they're seeking to rezone. That's been assessed as having some natural values, but it has also been significantly disturbed. And so therefore it's considered that rezoning the land to enable residential use will not have a broader impact on natural values within that council's within that, like under the code, and more broadly across council's use of natural resource land. The land's serviced and it's within the urban growth boundary. And in this regard, considering it's been deemed a surplus for the school, it provides an opportunity for housing to occur on the land, which is consistent with the regional land use strategy, high-level policy. It's also consistent with the Section 8A guidelines and the overall intent of the planning scheme. So it's considered it's appropriate to prepare the amendment to rezone. The request, subject property there, the request is combined with a residential subdivision for 19 lots, including the balance, which is the school site. There are a number of discretions associated with the planning scheme, with the subdivision application. However, the key one really relates to the access point and the road. The access to the site coming off Ransley Court has been considered in respect to sightlines and so forth for the land. However, there's a complication in the proposal in that the two properties which abut the site, so 5 and 3 Ransley Court, those two properties at the adjacent the access point, have had their driveways constructed illegally, in the sense that they weren't constructed as shown on the council's plans that we received as part of the building proposal. Now, that becomes really a civil matter. That's not something for council to undertake issues with compliance on. We would take issue with compliance for the building structures, but not specifically for the access ways to those two properties. Having said that, in order to seek to progress this application, our transport engineer has had a look as to whether the road access could be constructed in order to meet the required Australian standards to make sure that adequate view lines can be achieved and that the access to those two properties can be realigned and made safe. We've had discussions with the applicant, and they've actually gone out on site and spoken to both property owners, and both property owners have signed the application forms, so they're aware of the changes that would need to be made to their access points in order to facilitate subdivision, but also to realign their driveways to make sure that the access utilising their driveways and the proposed access ways would be potentially safe and in line with the Australian standards. So there has been that discussion. All parties are aware of that, and the transport engineer has recommended that a number of conditions be placed on the permit to just consolidate and confirm that that has occurred, or that, you know, it has occurred and / will occur as part of the project. So while there are a number of discretions, they've all been addressed, and it's considered that they can all meet the performance criteria. The key issue around ensuring that adequate access and safety of the access point for the access off the road has also been considered to be able to meet the performance criteria, and it's considered that the planning permit can be granted subject to conditions. So as far as the amendment process goes, this is bringing forward the first stage of the planning scheme amendment process. So it's really about the GPA determining whether it's appropriate to test the planning scheme amendment and combined permit, and prepare it and put it out on public exhibition. If that's what the GPA determines to do, and there are representations that come through that process, then there would need to be a future planning authority meeting. And at that meeting, then the GPA can determine whether to continue with the amendment and the permit, whether it wants to recommend to the TPC that there are changes to the amendment and the permit, or whether it wants to decide whether it recommends to the Tasmanian Planning Commission not to approve the amendment and or the permit. So the GPA recommendation here is, at this meeting, is to determine whether it's appropriate to test the amendment and subdivision and put it out on exhibition. Its officer recommendation is that that is the appropriate course, and that it's recommended that the planning scheme amendment and planning permit, subject to the conditions identified in the report, be prepared and certified and placed on exhibition for a 28-day period.
Great. Thank you, Lyndall. Any questions for Lyndall, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, and thank you, Lyndall, for a comprehensive report there. Just, you made a comment that the land, and I might have misheard this, was significantly disturbed. Sometimes I feel significantly disturbed. What does that mean?
So when we look at priority vegetation, sometimes the vegetation at ground level, because of, I guess, the location where it is, it's you know, surrounded by development, there's often quite a lot of weeds. So any of the priority vegetation, its value as priority vegetation significantly decreases because the land's been disturbed, there's been weeds that have come in through that area, and it really does lose its, I guess, its value as priority vegetation. So the natural values assets people use the term disturbed.
Good, I like that. It's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Lyndall? No. I had one about the gradient. Trying to find the page where I'd marked it.
Page 105, I think.
I've got the printed copy. So the subdivision proposal requires discretionary considerations that relies on performance criteria to comply with some applicable standards under the zone and codes applying to the land. So the proposal has not demonstrated that each lot has a 10 metre by 15 metre building area with a gradient less than 1 in 5. So can you just, and then it goes on to say, one of the dot points there is the topography is not unreasonable or excessive and is similar to that of Ramsley Court and less steep than some areas of West Moona, such as Atherton Avenue. So I guess I'm just seeking assurance. I can see here that the recommendation is the performance criteria has been satisfied and complies with the standard, but just seeking some assurance around gradient. I guess something we can be sometimes a bit nervous about. The gradient and any conditions required to make sure that it's safe to build on that topography.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I guess what we've actually, I guess that slope gradient in the acceptable solution, that's identified as being less than 1 in 5. This area has a higher gradient than that. However, it's considered reasonable given the context of the area. There is that ability to, subject to engineering requirements, so they will have to undertake further work to be able to develop on these slopes because they are steeper, but it's not necessarily uncommon or unachievable to be able to achieve a development on a slope greater than the 1 in 5.
So there are, under the conditions, I know there's 45 conditions recommended there in relation to the permit for the subdivision. So that would be covered under those conditions.
So that's for the subdivision element. So when a proposal comes back through, if it needs to go through that planning permit application for potentially for the single dwelling, or it would be picked up as far as the building code and the engineering design to make sure that the building's safe and can be built on that site.
So that comes at that stage. Yeah. Okay. Because it's only early stages, isn't it?
So there are some conditions here which we'll need to address the ability to be able to get onto the site for car parking, and that's been demonstrated as part of the plans that have been submitted. Those plans would also need to be further signed off and reviewed from an engineering point of view as well.
Great, thank you. No further questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
No? Excellent. Well, we have a recommendation, as Lyndall has explained there, to prepare and certify the amendment, grant the permit and put on exhibition for 28 days. To have someone to move the recommendation. Move to Alderman Ryan, someone to second, Alderman Dunsby. Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Lyndall. I actually think it's fairly straightforward, so I'm happy with your recommendation, subject to the conditions, to put it out for advertising and see what happens.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman Ryan. Any further discussion?
See what happens.
Good. Yep, I too am happy to support the recommendation. As we can see there, it's underutilised land at the school at the moment. Investigating the rezoning to facilitate residential subdivision is something that will support housing development in our municipality. So let's put it on exhibition and see what happens.
See what happens. Yeah.
All right, I'll put the recommendation. Oh, I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Ryan.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to reiterate what you just said is more subdivisions for housing is just what we need. So that's great.
Excellent, thank you. I will put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. That's carried unanimously. Linda, would you like to explain the process from here?
Yes, so the application and the subdivision will be put on exhibition for 28 days. So all the adjoining property owners will be notified. And if there are representations received during that process, then there will be a further report that will need to come back to the planning authority, and the merits of those representations will be considered and determined whether there is a need to change the planning scheme amendment or permit, or whether the GBA wants to continue on with the amendment and permit.
Right. Thank you, Lyndall. That brings our Planning Authority meeting to a close at 5:22 p.m. Thank you to our planning officers for their support today, and thank you to members of the public who have joined us online. Stay safe, and we'll see you for our ordinary council meeting at the end of July. Can't remember the date. The last Monday in July, 6 p.m. We'll see you then.